introduce Ashley Thuthao Keng Dam, who's going to be talking about digital gastro-solidarity. That's quite a title. Digital food community and resistance. So go for it. It's all yours.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'm really hoping that my presentation, as I share it, will appear correctly. Is it currently, let's see. Is it appearing in?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's good.
Okay, wonderful. I have to look into the camera without seeing myself because it isn't full screen. Hi, my name is Dr. Ashley Thuthao Keng Dam, and I am a visiting scholar in anthropology at Portland State University in good old Portland, Oregon. I am an anthropologist, a medical and visual anthropologist, an ethnobotanist, and a food writer. And I have
Hmm.
come to speak with you about this lofty idea called digital gastro-solidarity. We're going to talk about food, we're going to talk about the internet, we're going to talk about the brain rot, we're going to talk about media and how it all works to make us more in tune with ourselves, different systems and flows of social and political issues across the world. So before we begin, I just wanted to do a land acknowledgement of Portland State University, and we're located kind of in the heart of urban Portland, and we're located in the traditional and ancestral homelands of the Multnomah, Cathlamet, Clackamas, Tumwater, and Fallout bands of the Chinook and the Tualatin, Cambodia, and other indigenous peoples of the rivers that should surround us, such as the Lima, Beachwana, and the Columbia rivers. And we are super grateful to be guests on these lands, and I'm very honored to be invited to be a part of the anthropology department for a little. Moving on, I would also like to dedicate this presentation to my dear friend, Dr. Daru Matsuozuki, who left us way too soon. He really enjoyed a lot of my work when we were doing our PhD together at the University of Gastronomic Sciences in Firenze, Italy. And he really loved all the digital food stuff I used to do and currently still do. And it kind of feels strange to live in a world without him, but it is a real honor to share some of that digital food magic with all of you. If you're very interested in heritage foods of Kenya, I really encourage you to read Dalrym's work, and I hope that you share it with others. Now, what's on the menu today for this talk? I like to break my talks down to simple parts. It's easier to digest that way. So first, we're going to go over theory. So what is digital gastro-solidarity? How does it relate to past and current theories and concepts? What are the Lego bricks that make up this concept with too many little dashes in it? We're going to look at different case studies and consider where is this digital gastro-solidarity manifesting, and how do local traditions in which they are manifesting shape its composition and potential impact or impact in general. And then finally, we'll wrap up with sort of like a dessert course or whatever you want to call it in applications. So we're going to look at how we can use and orient digital gastro-solidarity in research, in policymaking, and activism. So where does one begin with food? As someone who is actually within food studies, whatever that means, we always start with anthropology. And anthropologists have been looking at food in so many fun different ways for so long. So how does this relate to the digital? How does it relate to health? How does it relate to society? What can we do when food enters this sort of digital space, digital world, digital universe? Or as some people say, the digital component to our lives as we know it, beyond life. As with all strange ideas, someone sits you down and says, you should write about that. So about 2 years ago, sitting down with the CastTech blog of the AAA, so that's like the science and technology focused blog platypus. And I was a contributing editor there for quite a long time, about 5 years. And I thought, I have an idea, but I'm a little scared about writing about it. And my friend sat me down and says, I need you to write this down, Thao. So I wrote this essay called Recipes of Resistance, Global Digital Gastro-solidarity for Palestine. And it was the most read article that year. And then I thought, okay, I should build upon this. So it always starts with a funny idea and a friend telling you to write about it. So what is digital gastro-solidarity? Well, it's that word. There's a lot of other different words here that kind of build into it. We have things such as gastropolitics, we have digital food, and then we have the digital gastro diplomacy, we have digital food activism, we have national foods, and then in blue we have food exploration, food education, brand boycotts, food hacking, and the promotion of social movements. So in some parts, it's about nationalism. In some parts, it's about the politics that arise from what you eat, how you eat it, and where you get it. It's about standing for something. It's about exploring things. It's about learning things. It's about meeting other people who think similarly to you. It's about rejecting brands and how they impact the environment. If it's about food and it makes you angry or hungry, it's sort of in this idea of digital gastro-solidarity. But on a more simplified sense, we should dive first into gastropolitics. So in this presentation, I'll pull from Epterai and also Lowe. And in combination, when we look at gastropolitics and how it fits in, we have to think about how the tensions between food, the senses, and political life interact with each other, and they kind of co-create and co-shape each other. So for example, group identity, political, sociocultural differentiation and stuff like that. You have to look at national foods. And on the left, you can see a few national foods that I pointed out. But this was kind of looked at by Ichigo and colleagues in 2019 in their book on national foods. And it's basically foods that are seen as national or representative of a nation or group of people, by at least some members of that nation. And this is very subjective to power flows because the majority picks what is considered national, and some voices are more elevated than others. So on the right-hand side, you can see sushi for Japan as being like, oh yes, it's a Japanese dish, it's very like part of the dish. We have fish and chips in the UK. We have pastéis de bacalhau from Portugal. They love codfish there. We also have the garoja from the Netherlands, which is a pickled raw herring, and we eat it with onions and bread and pickles. And these are some things that a lot of people within the country, but also within the global imagination of projection and expectations that people have, like as dishes or foods of those places, those countries, those people. Additional concepts which would be very helpful would be digital gastrodiplomacy, which is the internet-based collaborative construction and sharing of different ideas and concepts around the national foods. So like going back to sushi as being representative of Japan, perhaps there would be a lot of Japanese digital food creators or content creators who really, make sushi dishes, recipes, stuff like that, and we would say, this is very Japanese. Or the Dutch being like, this is really Dutch to eat pankroja or kroketjes or something like that. And simultaneously, when we have different kind of people, like non-government actors, expressing what it means in a food sense to be a part of a community, to be part of a nation, to be a citizen or a part of the group in general, we start to have different group tensions on how things should be, what people believe in, and how to advocate for yourself within the global food system. So one of the next topics I'll be talking about and how it relates to digital gastro-solidarity would be digital food activism, because I want to argue that gastro-solidarity is actually a different iteration or a different kind of leaf of the digital food activism. And this was written extensively by Tanya Schneider and colleagues in 2018 in the book Digital Food Activism. Highly recommended, really enjoyable. And they defined it as internet-based organized efforts to change food system or parts of which civil indicators of supporters use digital media. So people organizing online to discuss, interrogate, engage with, and also change different parts of the food system. And then since we are talking about the digital, whatever that means, like in air quotes, I really had to talk about panopticism. And I was thinking, where am I going to start with this? Foucault has said a lot. I've thought about Foucault a lot. Many people have thought about Foucault a lot. So I decided to adopt this quote, newer panopticism, mentioned in an essay by in 2018, where they argued that, we're living in this kind of era of quote new mode of surveillance, which is like infiltrating the body and encourages behavior as performance. And I was really interested about the behavior as performance part. We can go back all the way, to Goffman, of course, like everything is for performance. But what I was really interested in is this behavior performance as a result of the ongoing digitalization of daily life. We're in an age where everything is inundated with ICT technologies, and everyone is really interested in sharing with others their life. And by doing this performance, we not only enter a world of surveillance, but we also feel compelled to perform in a very particular kind of codified way, which I found interesting. Lastly, there is the concept of food as control and resistance. We already know from many different interdisciplinary studies that food is symbolic. It's got meaning inside of it. It acts as a vessel. It describes, it enacts, it does so many different things. Humanities spoke about it as, the vessel for the exertion of power from the eater, but also the person actually serving it or preparing it. And you can use food as a way to defy the powers in which they're trying to oppress you through giving of food. So in this whole kind of giant matrix of thinking about food as symbolic, thinking of food as a vessel, thinking about food as being digital, thinking about people being online, arguing, defining, trying to change the food system online, and then you're thinking about the constant surveillance. We've arrived. We've arrived in a world where food can be enjoyed at a distance without any sort of, I don't want to say like incorporation, like physical incorporation of food. So here is a fun example of that. You can identify all these characters in Animal Crossing enjoying some maybe udon noodle soup. We see jelly donuts. We see kind of looks like risotto. We see fruit. And we can recognize these things and we can add value to them and we can kind of categorize them as meaningful. And that's just, it's just a wonderful display of how like something so inherent to our survival, such as food, has transcended into how we interact with ourselves and others online. And why I thought this image was particularly funny is because it shows a virtual community, a digital community of, computer non-playable characters having a meal together, while also incorporating bits of the Last Supper. And is it the last digital supper? I'm not exactly sure, but I think it's definitely the first of many to come. So using all those different Lego components, we have digital gastro-solidarity. And I define it as those internet-based collective organizational efforts to demonstrate sociopolitical solidarity for a specific idea, a belief, or even movements through food, as well as adjacent engagements and processes with food. So like buying food, sharing food, learning about food, even tracking where the food is produced, where it comes from. And it can include sort of like the construction, the tinkering, and the sharing of ideas around national foods of a country, as well as the identities of the cultural groups that they may be associated with. So it's not just about nation, it's not just about ethnicity, it's not about race only, it's all of those things together. And I think it's fully possible to fight for what you believe in and fight against what you don't believe in through a meal or through food things online. So moving on to this, I just wanted to take you on a little short trip to one of my favorite websites in the entire world. And I feel like it's very silly for me to be saying this in recording, of course, but Reddit. I love Reddit because I think it's sort of this silly town hall situation. And one of my favorite type of genre of subreddits is ask n or a blank, and they'll put a nationality in there. So I looked up in Ask an American, what do you consider American food? And someone asks, no hate here. As a Brit, I enjoy memes about British cuisine and cooking as much as anyone, but I feel it gets an extremely bad rap. Anyway, I wondered what people in the US consider American cuisine. The obvious one, obvious, being hot dogs, burgers, which you could argue are German, pizza being Italian, Tex-Mex, which is at least half Mexican. Southern fried chicken, barbecue, meatloaf, pork and beans. Genuinely interested to know more about what is considered all American food. So I started looking at all the different comments, and I arrived at many different sort of observations. And what I started noticing is that a lot of people started making references to real, imagined, or even geographies, which is sort of this concept that I pulled from Dr. Tina Chen, who wrote about this concept of global Asias within Asian studies. And she argues that, there is a quote Asia, like Asia as a blob, as a region, as a concept and an idea that people collectively and also individually imagine. And somehow it amalgamizes all together to quote Asia. So looking at this kind of Reddit response, I thought similarly, people were thinking about, America in air quotes as being many different things naturally, because they come from different positionalities and whatnot. And you can see from this response, there's references to, what makes American food. It's that it's, borrowed from elsewhere. We've got mentions of globalization. We've talked about local adaptations where it says we borrowed from immigrants and put our own spin on it. There's a bit of a nostalgia that comes into play because it's about being American born and bred, the cuisine, the food, which is made here, which is ours. And it made me think a lot about Dr. Krishnendu Ray's work on, sort of like immigrant belonging, cooking and eating, especially among Bengali American households in the migrants' table, because I kept thinking, what is more American, according to this person, than taking something else from people who came here and then changing it? It's that innovation and taking a spin of something else to make it better, or it's implied that it's made better, is what American food is. That's the spirit of our cuisine, supposedly. That's one perspective. And then there's another response that talked about the multiplicity of what American cuisine is in their eyes. So they spoke about how they're from Appalachia, and they talked about different local ingredients, different local recipes. They talked about the different available mushrooms, as well as flora that they can only find and forage. They talked about local fauna. They talked about many different traditions, and they also talked about the globalization of different ingredients from the Americas elsewhere, and vice versa, and attributing these different foods not only to place, but of people and the dynamism of their foodways and cultures, which I really appreciated. So first we had a response that was like, we innovate, we make better, and then we have, this is what we have in this region, and this is how it's all connected together, and this is what it is for me. So it's that multitude, that idea of how food can describe, ascribe, and sort of interlink people, places, and products together. And what's interesting about gastro-solidarity is that it takes many, many different forms. Like we have videos, we have articles, we have like hashtag movements when Twitter/X wasn't so evil and people used it more. And what's interesting about it is that it provides very accessible, flexible, and very customizable ways to express and critique social culture issues during social media performances, even within hyper-surveillance contexts. So you can show your support for different things that you believe in through gastro-solidarity, even in a high-stress situation, because being able to read and understand the context of what you're actually implying, the subtleness has like a spectrum. So some people who are not paying attention will be like, well, that person's just eating a thing, or that person's just enjoying something. Oh, that's a little salty, that's a little red, that's a little green. That's different from what I would do if they wouldn't read into it. And this is really important in an era where we are not only very tuned in, but we are also very, very much observed constantly, and we're uploading and sharing on our own accord different facets of who we are and what we believe in a hyper police, hyper aggressive surveillance state. So now I'm going to go through different kinds of forms of gastro-solidarity. So the first one would be not buying solidarity. So we have boycotts. We have, I've just collected these across a few months. Well, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but it is a real subreddit. There is a subreddit called Fuck Nestle, where everyone who is in that subreddit really hates Nestle and all of their different products and the harm that they do for many different communities and ecosystems around the world, as well as their hyper questionable business practices. So the people of that community, that exercise gastro-solidarity, like in the boycott format, absolutely boycott Nestle. Coca-Cola has been widely cited for destroying the environment, for human rights violations, all these different things, and people are not buying Coca-Cola as much. Same thing for McDonald's for a bit after October 7th. Beginning of that side, there was all of this backlash for IDF soldiers being fed McDonald's, and people were feeling very upset about that and rejecting and also protesting in the McDonald's, because when you have a recognizable brand, of course, a global brand, it's going to be a great way for people to express their disdain by boycotting products. A few months ago, also, the Green Mint Majesty honey was considered the Charlie Kirk drink, and people were saying that if you ordered this drink that you were incredibly racist, and even the baristas were fighting back. In the Netherlands, a lot of activists put different stickers for the BDS movement on products in the Albert Heijn, which is like one of the larger grocery chains. And these are just some recent examples of how these sort of larger scale boycotts were orchestrated online. People would post about it. People would put stickers where you could print them in your local print shop or by yourself. And these different codes and systems were just disseminated instantly for people who believe in the same social causes to mobilize on a greater scale against larger brands and systems, food systems. We also have buying as solidarity. So we have boycotts. So on the left, we have sort of a reference to the seedlings movement. So SEA things, like siblings. And it's about the Indonesian protesters who were protesting against government corruption. And during the protests, a Grab delivery driver was killed in the police violence. So many different Southeast Asian people started using the app to order food through the Grab app to send to drivers in solidarity of their struggle for better wages and also the violence put against them and their involvement in the protests. So I found this like very interesting, where people were buying food through the app to support and demonstrate solidarity for the protesters on the ground. And in direct kind of contrast to Coca-Cola, as I mentioned in the previous slide, there was the development of Palestine Cola, which was been widely marketed amongst activist spaces and businesses in support of the BDS boycotts as an alternative to Coca-Cola. So here's a cola, here's like a citrus one that's kind of like Fanta, there's a diet version, there's a 0-calorie version. But they wanted to give consumers alternative modes of enjoying kind of the taste memories they have with specific products without sort of the ethical, moral implications of supporting a brand which doesn't abide by your values. We also have a lot of different ways that cooking acts as solidarity. So we have like historical background of mutual aid and community efforts. A few months ago in Portland last year, when the SNAP benefits were kind of being cut, a Portland coffee shop actually raised a lot of money to feed people who were losing their SNAP benefits for free. So they could be able to come in and say, I would like a SNAP breakfast, and then they would just get a free meal, no questions asked. And this was a really great example that of the community kind of coming together to prepare foods, to raise money and prepare foods for people who need them. So it was an expression of disdain of the government and how they're handling things and treating their citizens by cooking, preparing, and sharing. We also have, local food banks, for example, the Oxford Food Hub, which kind of fights food waste and community food insecurity through the redistribution of hot meals, which are cooked by volunteers. We also have cooking as solidarity in times of crisis. We have World Central Kitchen, and we also have in the US, this is one example, more localized. In Joplin, Missouri, there's Operation Barbecue Relief, where a bunch of pitmasters get together, typically during natural disasters, to feed families. And a lot of their efforts have been widely popularized online through like reels and different social media outlets. So a lot of people not only know about these organizations, but those outside of the community can also send supplies, send financial support to these projects, but also feel inspired to do similar projects in their area. So it kind of mobilizes in different areas this basic idea of cooking as solidarity through the digital spaces, especially. Within the food creator, content creator world, we also have people such as Carissa Eats, and she was very prolific during the 2020 lockdown as someone who was recording every day what she eats, and she was living in China actually as a performer. And she was cooking, I put this in air quotes, because she received a bunch of sort of PR packages from different restaurants for different ingredients, but also different meals. And what she did instead, because she couldn't eat it all as one person, she turned it into a bunch of different meals and gave them to unhoused people who were living in her neighborhood in New York City. So the act of sort of like, I don't know, even preparing, cooking is, people define cooking in many different ways. Whether you're in ingredients first or pre-made household is like a really big conflict online and also in the food studies community. But she demonstrates, even by the act of preparing, heating up, and reassembling foods, that it's possible to, share with others her support for a more just housing system and being against community like food insecurity by helping unhoused people access food. And as one observer notes, like, I hope more brands send you supplies. And this particular person also references the SNAP benefits being taken away last year. So how do you do like digital eating? Well, there are a lot of people who post videos online especially mukbangers or people who love to vlog. And here is Michaela True with a very hefty load of 14 subscribers. Either way, great content, love to see it. And she says, this is Culver's fries and cheese curds with a homemade sandwich. And she describes her whole meal. And she says that she's going to donate food to her local food bank from the proceeds of this video as long as it's up. So watch it as much as possible. So here is, someone displaying their food, eating online for others, and sharing this ethos of support food security in your own community. And this is her doing something about it. And in the genre of people eating foods, we also have more targeted ones. For example, we have James and Mark, two YouTubers who were doing a mukbang, which is like the performance of eating online for others, usually a lot of different foods laid out like that. And they're focused on raising money to support survivors of domestic violence, which, one of the hosts, Mark's nonprofits, does work in or supports. And this is just another way that, eating online sort of acts as a way for people to not only express their beliefs in certain social causes and movements, but also encourage other peoples to do so, because it's a live stream, they're interactive, there's chats, things are going on, people are talking, people are eating, but they're also talking. And they're also learning about how the same problem, for example, domestic violence, is prevalent all over the world, and how they can influence in their communities or directly into that community through sending in money, sending in supplies, and telling others about the fundraiser. It also gains a little bit of an interspecies dimension when we see these animal mukbangs. So here, this is actually by the Said Life, who is local to me. And she makes videos where she cooks really elaborate gourmet meals for her two dogs, usually two small dogs. But she decided that she would use the same model of presentation and performance with food to actually support animal rescue, welfare, and care in her local state of Oregon. So here she created a multi-course meal for a dog who is up for adoption named Snickers. And she writes, Snickers was displaced during the Texas floods. He's only 1 year old, but already a real gentleman and a dog wine connoisseur. So here you have someone whose whole brand was built on, gourmet food, animal, dog parent, pet parent content, but she is using her influence and her relationship in her performance of food online for others as a way to share and build community with people who also love dogs towards, the Oregon Humane Society, which she incredibly believes in. Another recent example I have is this man in Texas whose Instagram account is called Dine with Kent. So as he goes to different restaurants to try the food out for the first time, and he admits to himself that he's not really a traveled person in terms of like food palette. So it's like following him as a restaurant companion to see him try new things, and people really love his work. He's been going viral, as well as being interviewed for his just very frank, casual, and honest reactions to things. And when I was preparing this presentation, I thought, oh wow, I need to put Kent in there, because he just did this really great video about some Persian and Iranian restaurants. So not only does he go eat some Persian food, he does it in multiple places. And he starts off the video and he says, I'm thinking about you guys in Iran. And, here's a little bit of a covert way of just expressing empathy for, violence in a very stressful situation. And he's expressing very subtly that, like, he's disapproving of the violence against Iran right now. And he goes through these sort of like simple questions, is like, is Iranian food the same as Persian food? What are the dishes? What is the culture of Iran like? What's things like? And he asks all the people, the chefs who work in these restaurants, who are from Iran about their culture, and he kind of really shines a light on the human aspect of why we all love food as humans. So we focus on, cooking things, sharing, being kind, and things like that. And that's what Kent really highlights with his work. And it moved a lot of people because not only did he get attacked by certain highly uh, right wingers for actually enjoying Persian and Iranian food, he also got a lot of messages from people who are from Iran and said, like, um, it hasn't been easy here for the longest time, but seeing you stand with us and your thoughts is amazing. Thank you, sir. You're the best. Hopefully, we'll be liberated soon. And this is the kind of reaction he gets simply by just eating food, saying that he likes it, learning about different culture, and saying, I'm thinking about you guys in Iran. And it's just so subtle that, only a cross analysis, apparently, by a certain right wing video blogger would send a whole horde of people to attack him online to the point where he had to turn off comments. But the idea is that even eating the food can be seen in some lenses as solidarity. And I just wanted to highlight this in the case study. And the last example I have is feasting. So, like, what's the difference between eating and feasting? Well, there's a lot of different ways to spend that, but I'm just going to make it easy and just say eating you can, do with others, but feasting is something longer, usually in a larger group, and you kind of have something to celebrate or discuss, deliberate on, to deliberate on with others. And I wanted to put our attention to this project that ran from 2016 to 2020, which was called Make America Dinner Again. And it was started by two women named Justine Lee and Shria Cheng. And their motivation was to build understanding and empathy, across the country by having people eat dinner together to talk, because food is such a symbolic thing. Eating together is such a meaningful practice, and they just wanted to kind of recreate a sense of community through doing so. And I thought that this was so interesting because they were broadcasting these dinners online. They were motivating people through like targeted advertising and also sort of short videos to try to get other people across the country to make dinners with their neighbors who are different from them. So it was really creating the grassroots for a larger movement of getting people to have political discussions where they can bond and learn from each other over dinner. And when we look at all these different things, when you're thinking like, Thao, how can we have a video that says this, or how can we have an application, or how can we just have a few posts online that can motivate people from all around the country and all around the world to think differently about different groups, about different political issues, about different things that they're frustrated about in the system in a more cohesive way. How is this possible, and where do we go from here? Like, what's the impact of something like that? Well, in a research aspect, we can definitely see that there's an expanded role and impact of what I've been calling, and what other scholars in science and technology studies have called the on life. That the role and impact of the on life, as well as user generated social media, there's just so many different things going on. What goes on online is connected to the rest of your life. And in an era of user-generated things, we have all these different issues such as data ethics and privacy and, like I said, surveillance in general. But we also have to think about how this expanded role, these expanded relationships, and these expanded ways of expression can be mobilized for behavioral or positive social change. So if everyone is like putting in their 2 cents about different topics online, about this food thing or this political movement or this issue in their community, how can we pivot this role into actual changes in our community? Secondarily, within the research sphere, it's really interesting to look at each sort of expression of digital gastro-solidarity as sort of like a microcosm or just like a snapshot of how we're doing, how we're doing as a nation, how are we doing as a community, how are we doing as like a unit, especially within the eyes of people who are like us through informal actors. Like, it doesn't matter what the government is saying how we're doing or how leaders are saying we're doing. How are people like me feeling about what's going on? And you can see this through, gastro diplomacy. You can see this through people sharing recipes about intangible cultural heritage, especially when certain practices are being erased by larger structures. We can also see how different groups, such as the diaspora of different groups, are interrelating with each other from near and far. And we can just get like a better understanding of what's going on the ground. How can what's going on in the kitchen or at the dinner table tell us about bigger issues or places of interest within the grand scheme of things for a group? It's also interesting to look at digital gastrodiplomacy because you see a lot of instances of crowdsourcing for alternative modes of consumption, especially within the context of like overlapping crisis of war, of climate disaster, of like wage discrepancy and exploitation. Like, how can we enjoy food? How can we share? How can we live a more abundant, healthy, connected, and beautiful life during capitalism? How do we do that? And I find it so interesting that in these different videos, in these different kind of creative content that people are posting about food, that they are showing us how to enjoy our life and fight back within the systems that oppress us. Like, I don't have to drink like Coca-Cola if they support genocide. I don't have to drink Coca-Cola if they are destroying the land and taking water from communities all over the world. I don't have to do that. I don't have to. And I find that incredibly motivating to think that we can afford to think about, eat, and organize in new different ways. Within policymaking, I would say that you have so many different opportunities for new case studies for identifying, understanding, and engaging with hidden user identity, group trends, the potential harms which arise in these communities or within these kind of systems of interaction, as well as like potential intervention points within these different user groups, especially for like communicating with these people who are gathering with these different type of food beliefs, food ideas, and ways to change the system, which could be harmful as well. So regulating them would be a step within the policy sector, just to kind of understand, to what extent is, for example, a bunch of teenagers posting that they should drink 17 energy drinks in one day a problematic thing, and when do we stop that? For activism, there's so many different pathways, of course. I would say that digital food gastro-solidarity is accessible-ish for different groups, depending on, logistical things in terms of like widespread internet use, energy, but also like surveillance technologies. And not only is it accessible in terms of like being able to just like write something online, or so supposedly, these different groups can kind of connect together with these shared or mutually intelligible like online semiotics of just like different signals and stuff, especially like younger users. There's like different hashtags, different phrases, different versions of TikTok or Instagram that are kind of perfectly attuned to these different needs. So like, for example, if I were to decide that I just wanted to live a life where I'm only foraging certain things that are seasonal in my local area, and I decided I didn't want to buy any grocery vegetables anymore, I think that what would end up happening is that all these videos interlinked with these different streams in these gastro-solidarity kind of loopholes or like pockets of the internet would kind of collate all together. Also, within the activism sector, we have more chances for political expression and involvement with a perceived lowered risk threshold because we have this decentralization. Like, if I'm trying to express something or disdain for a particular topic through the way that I prepare food, or the way that I'm sharing a recipe, or the way that I am boycotting a brand, or I am eating like a product or a brand, this isn't something that is just all on me. this is something that just kind of disseminates supposedly organically through the online sphere. Of course, there are like infrastructural things like algorithmic media, but the idea is that it's a movement, it's a wave, it has multiple etiologies, and if you know, you know. So the takeaways I would say is like, Gastro-solidarity is like moving into the digital arena. It used to be just activists having dinner, which is also great. But now we have people, activists having dinner online and encouraging everyone else to do the same. And it demonstrates as a whole how something as mundane or daily and just kind of quiet as food media is evolving solely from entertainment, education, marketing purposes to do something else, which includes facilitating movements for social change. And we have to think of it as sort of like an umbrella term or like for a bunch of different kinds of digital food activism expressions, and it will vary in expression and scope and impact. And, it has a lot of potential for motivating people, considering it's kind of perceived to have a reduced risk in terms of like involvement. It's got decentralization and arguable discretion because, I mean, are you really going to get mad at someone for eating an apple if the apple means patriarchy or the government? Like, who knows? Like, maybe it's just an apple, but maybe it's not just an apple. Anyway, that's all I have to say. I really appreciate you giving me the space to just talk about digital food, people online, and different things that I've observed. And feel free to connect with me through email, browse my website, and also read the book that I have coming out next week with my lovely co-author, Dr. Stanley Ulieszek, where we write about mukbang, which are those food videos that I mentioned of people eating online for others, and food performance and digital media. So if you liked or want to hear more about or even argue with me about some of the things I said today, please send me an email, drop me a question in the chat, or read the book and tell others and then yell about it. I would really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Are we just, why don't we just open it up for questions? I have one if nobody else does. Um, I was wondering, so you talk about national identity, and I was wondering what your thoughts were, kind of in a Bourdieuian sense, about um, kind of eating certain types of food and asserting a class identity, not just a national identity. And I'll give you kind of a silly example. So when I first came back east from California, um, my mom had some relatives up in New Jersey, small town New Jersey, and I'd really not spent too much time in New Jersey. Anyway, I went to the small town and they had a Thanksgiving dinner, in a firehouse. And when I got in there and I was introduced as coming from California, immediately people told me, they said, "Hey, from California, no granola here and no yogurt." And it was all kielbasa and, this and that and that. And so, there is a certain habitus or a certain assertion of a class identity um, in that kind of expression. And I wondered what you thought about that.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think one of my favorite things to talk about when it comes to sort of gastro-solidarity events in general are like activist dinners where you have to pay like $250 for the cause to just even like talk about it and be taken seriously within the community. And yeah, I think there's definitely a class dimension to it in terms of even like the food content creation aspect of it, where I highlighted some of those people. You saw one YouTuber, she had 14 subscribers and she was just, having her lunch, right? Like in a bare background. And then you have people who are not only probably wealthy just by the production quality of their content, but they're getting meals that are worth like hundreds of dollars. Uh, so that like even though they are facilitators of like bigger ideas to get people moving like boots on the ground kind of thing, there is still that class dimension that is indistinguishable when it comes to food. And like my favorite mishmash example that recently happened was Rihanna eating caviar on McDonald's chicken nuggets. And that will always be my prime example of like, I think it's a bit, yeah, I'm not that rich. I don't think I'll ever be that rich. But, you know, one can aspire to be a chicken nugget caviar dipper.
Wow, there's many messages in that one.
I had a question. In your modes of gastro-solidarity, have you considered solidarity through commiseration? So a couple people here have heard my warnings about the horrors of scrapple and head cheese. Uh, I'm a veteran. I've had many conversations with other veterans about how to make an MRE palatable or close to palatable. Uh, so yeah, commiseration as a form of solidarity. Have you given thought to that, or what do you think?
Oh yeah, yeah. In my personal experience, back when Twitter was less evil and was called Twitter, we were doing like a sharing of different foods that we had in our childhood, which gave us a bit of trauma. But in addition to receiving a lot of messages of people commiserating with me, being not fans of bitter melon, I was thoroughly educated by the South Asian community across the world of a better way to prepare it to reduce the bitterness. So it became a learning experience. I also think the commiseration in terms of what you were saying about the MREs is really prevalent in certain groups that talk about food hacking. So kind of like how to take something in the everyday sphere, usually like an ultra processed food product, and make it better, make it gourmet, give it that class distinction, or just make it different. And it allows a bit of a sensorial, I don't know, like refashioning. Like it's not so bad. Like when you're in college and you eat the ramen 17 different ways.
It's the spam syndrome.
The spam syndrome, that's pretty funny.
Thank you.
You know, there's another, of the many dimensions that you've talked about. I mean, there's this issue, for example, among multiple Native American communities, people are eating fry bread. Even in Eastern Native communities where that was not actually an indigenous food to those communities, it was, it's more Southwest in origin, but it's become such a symbol, sort of a pan-native symbol of eating native. That it's interesting, and I don't know your thoughts about that.
Yeah, actually, a few years ago, I went to this Asian Studies conference called Euroseas in Paris, and I delivered this presentation about how that kind of pan food identification occurs in the Cambodian and Khmer diaspora in the US, and how people kind of differentiate themselves either through like marking dishes as more traditional or even taking these pan Asian things such as fried rice and making it more Khmer by putting it like with a Khmer name like Mai Cha or something like that. So they attract people with the pan dish because people are like can recognize it, they can grind it, but then they distinguish themselves and kind of draw people in by the name, the descriptions, the pictures, or say we have a flair. And I think within Gastro Solidarity, it just gives a bigger chance for more people who feel a part of a community to connect together. So if, for example, if I go down to Albuquerque and I go to Kiwa Pueblo or the Taos Pueblo, they're probably eating fried bread of different variants. Like my friend Mayani, she told me like, you gotta have it Navajo style. And I was like, I don't know what that means. And then in PDX, they had like an indigenous celebration. They were also serving fried bread. And my partner was like, whoa, they have it Navajo style here, but they don't have, do they have Navajo people here? And I was like, no, not to that I know of, but they like the Navajo style of eating fry bread, and that's fine. So I think it's a good way to draw people in to feel connected and then to discuss on a greater community level issues that they have a problem with, which probably goes to say, like, what's a food that we can share with across the Native communities in the United States that's like easy, accessible, tasty, and something like that. That's what I imagine. Adam or Lori, I don't know who called, put their heads up first.
Adam.
It was
Yeah,
me.
sorry.
It
Adam.
occurs to me as I was listening to this that this really connects to my world, which is disaster, in that this has been used for a long, long, long time to promote um, social action. For instance, and it's kind of horrible, but like the starving children in country X, and if you give this much money in the online or the even in the old days the newspaper advertising, if you give this much money, you can buy this many meals for people in this country. And so food has been used also for a long, long time, very widely as a fundraiser and as a form of you can't come to Somalia, but you can buy this many meals for children in Somalia. So it just struck me that I've been seeing this in my world for a very, very long time, and it's just been kind of automatic. Oh yeah, that's how we raise money. So this was amazing that there are so many other facets and aspects of it.
Yeah, I also think that going in that same vein, a lot of different charity organizations as well as religious organizations offer kind of food as a community service as like the first line, one of the first lines, like free meals. Uh, and I think it's just, I don't know, I think when you have something tasty and you're sitting together, you just feel a bit more happy to be human and happy to help others. And it's just a very fundamental thing, right? So I think that ethos that is built around sharing food and eating food and just relaxing, or even in a chemical sense, that elevated joy really can inspire different kinds of reactions and action.
I think also that one last comment, and then Lori is next, is that again related to that in the media, there's that trigger when people say prevent famine or help prevent famine or there's a famine going on or oh the media has to pay attention because now there's almost a famine. So that famine is a trigger and obviously that's entirely food related, but that's a trigger around which so much other action and activity and politics and diplomacy and advocacy center, and a lot of that is digital. So it's just my last comment.
Yeah, thank you so much. Okay, Lauren.
Thanks. There's a whole other area that I'm actually interested in as a medical anthropologist, and that is food and illness. And there are all kinds of illnesses where people can't eat certain kinds of food, and then how that plays out digitally, because that's how people relate across countries who have the same kind of syndrome. And how that integrates the different ethnic foods is really very interesting. So that's something that I've been interested in looking at. And what I once wrote a paper about is food as love. Based on my research in Egypt, is food was equated to love, and if someone ate a lot of your food, that meant they loved you. It's really interesting.
Wow. Two comments in relation to love. It just reminds me of like water for chocolate. I don't know if you've heard of
I
that, but
saw that. It's great. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's really, really great magical realism. And the second one about like on the medical anthropology and the ethnic foods. Actually did my PhD on that topic. I looked at
Kidding, that's great.
food medicines in Cambodia during times of human ecological crisis, and I looked at seasonality, maternity, and the COVID-19 crisis as sort of like shapers of how people selected their food medicines for specific illnesses. And I think you're absolutely right, because even in my experience working in Cambodia and researching, I found that there are a lot of Facebook groups and also TikTok videos and Instagram things that really informed a lot of these young mothers about what they should not be eating. You know, some of those videos are not true at all, of course. But they also perpetuated sort of, I want to say, the revival of a lot of folk ideas about food. And I found that really interesting, because some of the people I interviewed, they will say things like, oh, I grew up in a household with biomedicine, but I feel more Khmer if I, eat the traditional prenatal diet. And I wanted to know more about that. So I looked at these mother groups per se to see what they were eating. And it had people motivated to go foraging or buying these foods, which are herbals or mushrooms or fruits or things like that, in very particular ways, which are outside of kind of the grocery store chain. Like, I had one person say to me, if you love your wife, you get her an ostrich egg. And I was like, where do I get an ostrich egg in Cambodia? And he said, I don't know, but someone brought it for my wife, and I was really impressed. Things like that. And those are when you can, pick and choose your traditions, and you can choose, biomedicine, you can choose traditional, you can choose folk, you can choose anything. But being able to kind of look through different types of media and see all these different things that you care about kind of siphoned out for you that informs your practice with health or food or medicine and life is very, very riveting for me, because, like I said, brain rot. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of bad things out there that are rotting brains right now. But in that sea of information, so many cool things are happening.
Actually, during COVID, it would have been a great time. I not to use great, but to look at, especially among immigrant communities, to look at WhatsApp groups and things like that in terms of the dissemination, especially like from Southeast Asia, people disseminating a lot of bitter, very bitter, leaves and kinds of things, under the assumption that bitter will um, fend off, whatever that is. So yeah, bitter melon too.
Yeah, we wrote I have one paper that I co-authored with a bunch of different ethnobotanists that looked at kind of community-based health strategies for COVID-19. Maybe I can link it in the chat. For Cambodia, I just found a lot of ginger and garlic, but yeah, bitter tasting things is better, right? Overall.
We get a lot of free bitterroot from a Vietnamese neighbor who's behind us and grows a lot. So he's always giving us bitter melon.
I wish I could like it. Last time I was in Cambodia was about 2 or 3 years ago, and I went to a restaurant, and the woman told me in Khmer, she was like, "You're an adult now, you can have it." And I said, "Please, auntie, don't make me eat this. I don't want to insult you by not liking it." And I ate it anyway because I felt obligated to eat the free soup she gave me, but it was really a struggle.
Doesn't, particularly during COVID, but also doesn't, and for new mothers, doesn't that reflect the underlying medical system, the indigenous medical system, which isn't so indigenous because it's probably part of several parts of Asia. But wouldn't that do that? Why would you want bitter? I mean, there's got to be a reason for that underlying that in the indigenous medical system.
Yeah, for my research for the Khmer traditional medicine, Khmer system, it's sort of like a humoral thing, and there is a taste-based approach to the effects of how food will affect your humors. So bitter being more cold, and salty being more hot, for example. And depending on your stage, reproductive health, so like prenatal, you're pregnant, or postpartum, or breastfeeding, there's different temperatures, humoral temperatures that you have to eat in response to. But yeah, also another thing that I have to probably publish for my PhD. It always ends up like that. You just have like a stack of things you don't publish. That's what I found. And I wouldn't be surprised to see if there's other similar mechanisms in other Southeast Asian countries.
And there's always food and sex. You might want to look at the eating scene from Tom Jones, the original Tom Jones.
I just saw your comment in the chat, Adam, about mukbang, on-site restaurants and street eating and commentating on it.
Yeah, but it's like too much. You're sitting in your living room watching other people eat delicious food like every single time you turn on the TV, like almost every channel. It's like it's no, I want to go there. I don't want to, or you think people are getting paid to do what I'm watching them do, and I'm just sitting here like with a cup of coffee and a Danish.
So you need to video yourself watching it. So it'll be like a hall of mirrors kind of thing. So you'd have a commiserating people who are commiserating with you about watching other people eat great food.
I guess that qualifies. Sure, I'll do
Yeah,
that.
while you're eating like a can of Pringles or something, you know. I think that I think you got it. You have a space to work there.
You really need to read the book. It comes out next week. You really need to read the book. It was a joy to research. It was
Yes.
a joy to write. It's been something that has been blooming inside my imagination since like 2017 or so, because I watched a lot of these mukbang videos when it was really starting in 2010s. So the fact that it's kind of like come up again and again and again, because it's definitively different, or it feels different than, let's say, a travel show where someone's like showing you what's going on, or an instructional food video. It's something that's really visceral and being like, what? I can do that too. What makes it so interesting? What makes it so compelling? And why is this making me hungry? Because it's quite grotesque, and the sounds, the noises don't always work for people. But that's what I would recommend, Adam. If you're sick of watching it, you should read about it in the book.
You know,
Well, actually, I mean, I may well read the book. It looks really interesting, but my reaction to that is to go out of my house here and eat something
that's a good
for real.
reaction. Yeah. There's a store nearby, very close to our house called the Angkor Market. So it was because there used to be a Cambodian community down there. Now, not so much, still some, but yeah, so still Vietnamese or Cambodian and Vietnamese go there, and the store is now owned by an Ethiopian.
Is it the one in Langley Park?
Yes.
That's the one I went to growing up. I actually wrote a zine about that place.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, it's different now than it was, but because he used to have like buckets of in the back, of fish and meat and water, and so we jokingly called it the stinky market. You go in there and
It's That is so funny, because in that exact scene, I talk about the association of like smells and things being slightly rotten as being authentically good,
yeah,
because it was
sure.
something that I experienced growing up. I think also in College Park, they'd have a course. I can't remember which professor taught it, about local foodways, like immigrant foodways and diaspora foodways. And they actually mentioned that market. Someone
That's
cited it
funny.
as the course.
Yeah,
In
that's
in
funny.
Upper Rockville, there's also a huge Chinese grocery store that is like as soon as you walk in the door, it's all the different smells, and it sounds exactly like that, but it's enormous.
Yeah, there's Eden Center in Virginia, and there's a big market there. That's a Chinese market, and it definitely has a certain when you go in there, it's got a thing. But my wife, who's from Laos, always goes down to the Cambodian market because she can get certain things there. So interesting.
Yeah, I grew up in Eden Center too, because my dad's Vietnamese. I always thought it smelled like bakery goods and cigarettes because I think that people were always like smoking cigarettes and playing cards or something
Yeah,
like
well, there's that. Yeah.
playing billiards or something. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
This,
right. There was a pool hall there once. But now there's a big Chinese market, big Chinese grocery store, along with all the jewelry stores and the various other things. Anyway, that's taking it off in a different direction here. Uh, other questions? Anybody? This is very interesting. Very, really, really very interesting. And we really appreciate. Are we, Matt, we're going to be able to post the slides, right? Is that okay, Ashley, if we do that?
oh yeah, there's like things LinkedIn and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll try to get the recording up this weekend, hopefully.
Sounds great. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for letting me talk about these things.
Come,
It's not
come
so
on, come on. That was probably not pronounced very well, but
I can never get that right either. It's we have to. I think you have to be there, to say thank you the right. And even then, it's gonna be hard. But thank you for
yeah,
chatting with us. Yeah.
yeah.
no,
Thank
I
you
go
very
come
much.
on. Yeah.
I'd also like to wish everyone a very happy Khmer New Year because it's the first day
That's
of the
right.
year. So
That's right. Yeah.
tonight, so it's really nice.
First, Sogdi Bimai in Lao.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I hope everyone gets motivated to have a really nice meal and also argue about, the state of the food system at the same time.
All right. Thank you.